No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to tell you about two wonderful divorce attorneys and Divorced Girl Smiling trusted professionals. The first one is Catherine Miller, who is the founder of Miller Law Group with offices in New York and Connecticut. Catherine has been practicing divorce law for over 30 years. I met her in 2020 when I was a guest on her podcast, Divorce Dialogues. Catherine is wonderful. She definitely wants to solve all her cases through mediation, although if you need to litigate, there are other lawyers in her firm that do litigation. But Catherine is just so experienced, so dedicated, really passionate about helping people through divorce, and I very, very much trust her. If you want to learn more, you can find her at miller-law.com or in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. The other divorce attorney I want to tell you about is Liz Felt Wakeman, who is in Illinois. She's in the northern, western, and northwest suburbs of Chicago. And Liz is awesome as well. She has been a divorce attorney since 1993. She's also a certified mediator and collaborative divorce attorney. And I have gotten to know Liz in the last year or so, although I met her several years ago. And Liz is wonderful, so ethical, always looking to do the right thing, always looking to take the high road, and her standards are really high for fairness and the best possible divorce outcome for her clients. If you want to learn more about Liz, you can find her either in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling or at wakemanlaw.net. There are certain conversations, we all know this, that are really hard to have. One of them is, honey, I think we should talk about getting a divorce. Another one might be, look, I know that you are cheating on me and we have to address this. Another one might be, look, we're getting divorced and we have to talk about what we're going to do with our parenting schedule. So do you see where I'm going here? There are conversations that are really difficult to have, and they could make somebody feel really hurt, angry, frustrated, disappointed. And so we want to offer tips for good communication for these really difficult conversations. And my guest, best guest for this, her name is Marty Winder Adams. Marty is a certified divorce transition coach. And Marty, hi.
Jackie, so great to be able to speak with you again today.
You too. And Marty, I want to tell everyone listening, Marty wrote an article for Divorced Girl Smiling called 4 Tips to Having Difficult Conversations with Your Ex. And Marty, what I love about you is you're a really good communicator. And communication, don't you agree with me, can make these conversations so much easier if you know how to do it.
Absolutely, Jackie. And I think that's the key. And honestly, I always thought I was a good communicator. And then when I got into mediation, I really learned some super effective ways to stay neutral in a highly intense discussion, even though you're not a part of the discussion as the mediator, you are the neutral third party, but you still get emotionally caught up in conversations unless you're able to emotionally kind of disengage and step back. And I just really find that using those tools in my personal and professional life has really ramped up my ability to communicate effectively, even with conversations that are kind of icky to have. And you may be dreading them. You may be feeling sick to your stomach knowing you got to have them. But these are the conversations that make a big difference, particularly in things like divorce.
Okay, so you wrote this article, 4 tips to having difficult conversations with your ex. And the first tip you give is the power of active listening. And that really hit home for me because I feel like when people want to get a point across, they're so focused on what they want to say that they don't actually listen actively to what their spouse is saying. Tell me about that.
Absolutely, and that is exactly what people do, and everybody does it. You have to catch yourself and stop yourself from doing it because we don't like it when we hear information that we don't agree with, especially if it's information that's, that may be an attack on us or that maybe makes us not look good in the particular light of the way that the person's sharing the information. Or even if it's something that's really near and dear to us, like our kids or our financial stability or who's going to live in the house and who's going to move out and all those kind of things. So that active listening is really being able to not just hear the words that somebody's saying, but really try to understand from their perspective what's going on and also to read the whole conversation. So not just what they're saying, but what is their body saying? What how are they changing the tone of their voice, the speed of the how they're talking? How are they making eye contact with you or not making eye contact with you? And more importantly, what are they not saying in the conversation? And recognizing all of that and then formulating a response based on all of that information, not just on that one thing that they said that you didn't agree with.
All right, so let's break it down. Let's give an example. Like, let's say you are in the middle of your divorce right now and you are trying to figure out with your ex what you're going to do with the house, but you really want to keep the house. And let's say, Marty, that someone says to their ex, look, I really want to keep the house. And the ex says, look, we can't afford this. There's no way I can get an apartment and you can keep this huge house. And what do you say?
And so I think the first thing, if you're going to use the active listening technique, is perhaps to ask the other person a really simple question. Can you tell me more about that? Because there may very well be solutions that you could accommodate keeping the house and having somebody else move out. But in the heat of the moment, you're only gonna see my point and their point. There's no middle ground or there's no, there's nothing other than my version and your version of the story. So, asking that simple question, "Tell me more about that," gives them a chance to talk about it, to maybe talk about their fears, to talk about their concerns. And once you understand what their fears and concerns are, then you can formulate a response that addresses those. So, again, it's a little counterproductive, but it's slowing down the conversation and really understanding what the other person is, what their concerns, their fears, their beliefs about whatever that statement is that you made, like, I want to keep the house.
Well, it's interesting because money is a funny thing, and people who say, "I can't afford it," half the time they can afford it, it's just an emotional fear. Like, "Oh, now we're gonna add another $3,000 a month on because I'm gonna have to get an apartment, it's gonna be 3 grand a month," but they can afford it. So if you're listening, maybe someone tell me if this is what you're saying, Marty, about active listening. Say, it sounds like you're really nervous about the money situation. But let me tell you why. I talked to our financial advisor, and he seems or she seems to think that we can afford it if we do a thorough financial plan and try to figure this out. I know you have fear about this. I can hear it in your voice, and I get it. I do too. But the bottom line is I think we should talk to our financial advisor.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really good example, and that also brings something else in that's not really part of active listening, but it is in that planning for the conversation and having some data points if you need them. Like talking to your financial advisor before you talk to somebody about the house. And a certified divorce financial analyst is a great professional to help you with that. Or thinking in advance about what do you think the other person is going to say? And that way you can have sort of an understanding of how you're going to present information so that you can be fully present when they're talking, and your wheels aren't spinning trying to come up with the answer. You're able to be present and listen to what they're saying.
And what I was gonna say is in that whole thing I said that somebody might wanna say is better than saying, "You know what? You've always been cheap. You never wanted to spend. This is a chance. We have to do this. See the difference?" There's no way Rex is gonna go for it that way. I had a really good manager at my last job before Divorce Girl Smiling took over, and I was able to leave the job, but she was a great, great manager, and once she said to me, if you're asking something from anyone, whether it's in business, if you're asking for a raise to your boss, if you're asking your husband for something, have information to back it up, why you want it and why you think you deserve it. And so that's what you were saying, Marty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the other thing about active listening too is you really need to be I'm going to use this term, fully present. You need to be making eye contact with the speaker. You need to be nodding your head. Just because you acknowledge what they're saying doesn't mean you agree with it. And I think we have to get out of our heads that, well, they can't ever come up with a good point. And unfortunately, sometimes I hear that in mediation and in divorce coaching where the person I'm talking to, or one person, feels they have all the answers and they feel the other person is just creating problems. It's not the case ever. There's always some good and bad. I shouldn't say ever. That's very rarely the case. There's always an exception to that rule. And you can be dealing with somebody who's got some kind of mental health problem or addiction, or somebody who is just so toxic that they cannot be reasonable. So yes, there are those people out there. Thankfully, not many of us have to deal with them.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today I'm here with divorce coach Marty Winder Adams. And Marty and I are talking about tips to having difficult conversations with your ex or soon to be ex or spouse that you want a divorce from. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we have 3 more great tips. We'll be right back. I want to tell you about a wonderful financial advisor who specializes in helping women during divorce. Her name is Amanda Campbell. She's a CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. Amanda has been a financial advisor since 2010, but got into the niche of helping divorcing women when one of her friends was going through a divorce several years ago, and Amanda was trying to help her make the best possible decisions. Like, should she keep the house? What should she ask for in the divorce? How much did she need to live on? And this is what spawned her interest in helping all women going through a divorce. I love Amanda. I trust her so much. She will hold your hand through the entire divorce and help you make good decisions and get the best possible divorce outcome. If you want to learn more about Amanda, you can find her on the WealthSpire website. And you can also find Amanda in the Trusted Professionals section of Divorced Girl Smiling. I also want to tell you about a wonderful real estate agent in Chicago in the suburbs. Her name is Stacy Yesner, and she has been a real estate agent for several years. She also lived in Chicago and in the suburbs, so she knows both the suburbs and the city. She's a former social worker, which I think makes her great at what she does because she's a great listener and knows the feeling of being a first-time home buyer, especially after divorce, and the stress that goes into selling and buying a home. If you want to learn more about Stacy, you can find her at stacysellschicago.com, and that's Stacy with an I. And you can also find Stacy in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about those difficult conversations that sometimes you have to have with your ex or soon-to-be ex. Things like even, I want a divorce. What are we going to do about the parenting plan? I want to keep the house in the divorce. Honey, I think you need to go back to work. anything that is a difficult conversation, and we have tips. My guest is awesome. Her name is Marty Winder Adams. She's a certified divorce transition coach. Before that, she spent 25 years mediating. Marty's a great communicator, great person. All right, Marty. So let's go to the next tip, which is reframing negative comments. Tell me about that.
Well, actually, you did a very beautiful reframe when you gave your example in the of the house comment. So, I just want to just briefly reframing is a technique where you take a negative bit of information that's not going to move the conversation, and you spin it or reframe it to the positive. So, if somebody says, "There's no way I'm moving out of the house. We can't afford it." Saying, I understand that there's a financial concern about moving out of the house and you feel really uncomfortable about that. Let's explore some options to address your concerns and my concerns. The goal of reframing is to get people out of that negative cycle of we can't, we can't, we can't, and there's a problem, to actually pushing their thinking into the front part of their brain, their executive part of their brain, the frontal cortex, to get them to be able to say, there's got to be solutions to this problem. Once you start working on solutions, you're in a way better space than if you're working on the problem.
All right. What if somebody says something really hurtful to you? Like, you know what? You never worked. I spent 25 years working in this marriage, making money, bringing home a paycheck, and you had a great life, and I gave you a great life. Well, that's really hurtful. What do you say to that?
It is, and so the natural response is to get really defensive, right? And it is for all of us. That's just our
Okay, can I
natural.
just say what a person might wanna say? "You know what? I freaking did everything. I raised your kids, our kids, I cooked, I cleaned, I managed the house, I planned the vacations, I paid all the bills, I did this. Don't tell me I didn't work."
Yeah, how dare you? That's
Mm,
really the response, right? So yes, you can do that. And if you do that, if you're like most couples and you do that, this is just going to devolve into an argument you've had a million times before. It's almost like you could just tape it once and then every time you want to have the argument, just go hit play on the tape recorder. I'm old school. Tape recorders don't exist anymore, but you know what I mean?
yes.
So you can almost literally have this it's an exact replica of the argument you've had, like I say, multiple times before. So a better way to do that, or a reframe to do that, would be put yourself in their shoes. Doesn't mean you agree with it, but where are they coming from? What's the emotion? Do they feel hurt? Do they feel used? Do they feel that life is unfair for them? And just give them that back and say, wow, it sounds like you are really concerned about being fair. That's really what the root cause of that, right, is fairness. Tell me more about how you could see this done in a way that would respect that need for fairness.
All
We're
right, so
pushing them to think.
you're saying don't even go there. I'm saying you might even if you have enough tolerance, you could say, "You know what? It sounds like you feel like you spent years working, and I appreciate that you brought home a paycheck for 25 years, but I did my part also, but I do appreciate what you did for the family."
Sure, you could approach it that way. That's another great way. As long as you let them know that you understand that they're upset. They're angry, they're upset, they're betrayed, they're hurt, they're frustrated, whatever that emotion is. As long as you recognize that that is there and you're validating their concerns. You're not saying they're right. Again, you're just saying, yes, from your perspective, that's what you believe. And how do you see this being solved? Or what would you like to see come out of this? How can we work to create fairness moving forwards? Any of those kind of things are great. This is not normal. It's not natural. It's work to do this, but it is such a powerful tool.
Okay, number 3 of the tips is regulating your own emotions, and this is really hard to do.
It is. Yeah. So in order to be able to do the first two and the last one we're going to talk about, we need to be in control of ourselves. If we escalate at the emotional level, once we get into that fight, flight, or freeze mode, we've lost it. We're not going to come up with a solution. We're not going to talk our way out of it. There's a lot of research on that kind of sweet spot where people can make decisions. So a little bit of stress is good because it promotes that need to come to a solution. A lot of stress defeats the whole option, right? And so that's really why mediation works so well for couples, because the mediator keeps things neutral. They help to regulate the emotion in the room. But you can do that for yourself. So, strategies I work with my clients on are things like being mindful and present. How do you calm yourself down? Your mom and dad probably told you, take 3 deep breaths. That is still a very powerful tool. There's a lot of research on why that works. So, taking that deep breath, being prepared, like we talked about at the beginning, knowing your numbers, have some possible solutions kind of in your back pocket, that if you ask them to come up with a solution and they can't, you could say, well, you know what? I'm just going to put this out on the table. It's just a thought. Let's consider it. And then give them, what you've thought about as a solution to the kids, the house, the money, whatever it may be. Um, but the other thing that about emotional regulation is being able to say, "Let's take a break." And there's nothing wrong with that. And if you say it in a really honest and authentic way, you can even say, "I feel myself getting really emotional about this, and I know when we're emotional, we don't make great decisions. Let's just take a break from this conversation. Let's come back in 5 or 10 minutes. I'm going to go step outside." You can do that in person, on the phone, whatever, but somebody's gotta take control of the emotions, because if you both escalate together, you're going up. When I used to be in school, we tell the kids, "You're walking up Anger Mountain, right? When you get to the top, that volcano just blows." So what you don't wanna do is get up that mountain. So what can you do to calm yourself down? The other thing I encourage people to do is even simple little things like just rubbing your index finger and your thumb together and just very gently feeling that sensation. See if you can actually feel each one of the ridges on your fingers. That's just a mental distraction.
Mhm.
And it's also like a physical stimulus that if you practice doing that when you want to stay calm, um, when you feel yourself getting upset, you will naturally do this and it'll just help regulate your system. You just have to practice it. And you can do that under the table if you're in a meeting at work and people are stressing you out. Nobody knows what you're doing, right? Um, Another good tip for emotional regulation for parents is picture your child's smiling face in your mind when you feel yourself getting upset. And just say to yourself, if this beautiful child was here right now, how would I behave? How would I handle this conversation? And that can quite often help people calm down.
Okay, I love all of these suggestions. I was gonna add to it and say that sometimes if you take that break, 5 or 10 minutes, and you go outside, like, I remember being upset about something pretty recently, and I went outside and I thought to myself, "You haven't even looked at the sky today. You haven't even looked at how beautiful God has made this world for you." And then everything gets put in perspective. Like, this is such a small thing in the long scheme of life. And my mom always says, everything always works out, doesn't it? At some point, it just does. So, if you can look at the bigger picture, and the best way to do that for me is nature and say, God has created this world. I have air in my lungs and I'm breathing and I'm looking at this and it's beautiful. It just kind of reframes everything. And then Marty, one thing you wrote in the article that you didn't talk about is how, when trying to regulate your emotions, it's not easy to do, but if you think, "All I'm here for really is to get what I want." Like, if you're in mediation, not like you're not saying, "Oh, you don't give a shit about your ex." That's not what I'm saying, but, like, what's the main goal here? It's
Yeah.
to get what you want. You're having this conversation because you want something. So how do you get it? Do you get it by saying, "You know what? You were the worst husband in the world. I'm so glad we're getting divorced. This is just reinforcing all the reasons I want to divorce you." Well, that's not really going to help you get what you want. So think to yourself, be smart, hold
Yeah.
things back, and just say what you need to say to get what you want. I mean, it sounds kind of like, kind of harsh, but it is kind of true.
Well, It is true, and one thing when I'm talking to people in mediation as a mediator, when I get to caucus with them and meet with them privately, or when I'm talking to my clients going through divorce, preparing for mediation, I always give them that exact piece of information. And I always say, just think about it like this. If you're able to keep them calm, you help them make better decisions. You know what happens when things escalate. So if you can do whatever you have to do to keep yourself calm, you'll keep the whole environment calmer, and your likelihood of getting what you want, exactly what you said, goes up exponentially, if you're able to stay in control of your emotions.
All right, last tip. Focus on solutions, not problems, which we've kind of been talking about that this whole podcast.
Right. Because a lot of people go into any kind of conversation during a divorce wanting an apology from their ex-partner, wanting acknowledgement that they were done wrong in the relationship, wanting the other partner to admit that they are the one that caused the problem. And I'm sorry, but if that's what you're looking for, you're not likely to get it. I mean, sometimes people may have that breakthrough moment and they may apologize authentically and genuinely, and that's wonderful if it happens. But if that's what you're holding out for to get a settlement, or to manage, or to get a win, you're not likely, you're setting yourself up for failure. I really believe that. So I think, when you're talking about solutions, when you hear things that you see as common goals between the two of you, don't be afraid to point them out. Because once there's that sort of path of, yeah, we are starting to agree on some of this small little stuff, who gets to keep the coffee maker, who keeps the silverware great Aunt Millie gave us at our wedding 30 years ago. Like, when we can agree on those little things, we build up that momentum of agreement, and then people are more willing to look at solutions for big items like the house, like the retirement plan, like the kids co-parent, or like the co-parenting plan. So working on small agreements, and also acknowledging when the party maybe gives in on something, saying like, thanks, I really appreciate that. I know that was difficult. Thanks for giving me the coffee maker. You know what? I know you've always wanted whatever it is. Why don't you just go ahead and take that? Like, small little exchanges like that can really build up a lot of power towards the solution. And I think the other thing too, and I know we've talked about this, Jackie, is the whole idea of brainstorming. You can put ideas out there and then be open to them being rejected or being modified or being changed. And again, if you're able to accept the recommendations or the suggestions from your partner, whether you're just talking or in negotiation or in mediation, you're going to get moving towards solutions. And once you start seeing some success, you're going to feel a lot better about yourself, about future conversations, and about the whole divorce experience.
Marty, I just love it. All great pieces of advice. Thank you so much for taking time to have this wonderful conversation.
Jackie, thank you so much. It's always fun to talk with you, and communication is my passion. So I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Well, if you like what you heard and you want to work with Marty, you can find her at divorcecoach4women.com, and it's the number 4. I don't know why I just had like a total brain freeze. All right, divorcecoach4women.com. You can also find Marty in the trusted professional section of Divorce Girl Smiling. Thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.